Welcome to Sunday at the Segal, our first session of a brand new season. I'm your host and moderator today, Sarah Deshaies. The show we are here to discuss is Every Brilliant Thing. But before we begin, the Segal Center is situated on the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka people. The land was also a diplomatic meeting place with other Iroquois and Algonquin groups, including the Algonquin Anishinaabe, Atikamekw, and Huron-Wendat. We acknowledge that we are located on a land that has been the site of human creativity and storytelling for thousands of years, and we are thankful that we are able to create, collaborate, play, and work here. Thank you all so much for being here today. In a nod to the coffee and the rugelach that we would normally have at the Segal Center in person, I've got my coffee today. And I don't have any rugelach, but I am enjoying my neighbor's homemade pumpkin pie. So I hope you have something sweet and something caffeinated or uncaffeinated with you today. We're going to have a really nice time. Thank you so much for joining us here on the interwebs. So in Every Brilliant Thing, we meet a child who is dealing with some very adult problems. Their mother has chronic depression and is suicidal. Hearing that she has been hospitalized, the child starts to compile a list of brilliant things to brighten their mother's world. Simple and yet perhaps overlooked items. Into adulthood, we are reminded that life will always be hard, but it is worth living. That is the message from the men who crafted the tale, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them and their process before we bring in our panelists. Every Brilliant Thing was actually based on a short story titled Sleeve Notes by English playwright Duncan Macmillan, initially adapted and performed as a short-form play, but he and director George Perrin spent over a decade shaping it into a full-length show. Enter Johnny Donahoe, a stand-up comedian who brought his stagecraft to shape the play in a way that Duncan and George had not yet conceived of, which is why Johnny earns a credit next to Duncan's name on the playbill. The show had elements that were truthful to the lives of both of these men, but yet the story is not one person's exact experience. The play was first produced at the Ludlow Fringe Festival in 2013. It had 3 sold-out runs at the Edinburgh Fringe and premiered in North America at the Barrow Street Theatre in Manhattan back in December 2014, where it was also filmed for HBO. And it continues to be performed around the world. Playwright Duncan notes that his final text has been, quote, filtered through Johnny's interaction with hundreds of audiences. But of course, since then, other actors have gone on to fill the role of the narrator or the child we meet. It can be played by someone of any gender or ethnicity or age. And because the show relies strongly on the audience, who together play 7 different roles in the narrator's life and even offer up their own belongings as props, no run or performance of Every Brilliant Thing is ever the same as the last. And so we thought it would be fascinating to speak with actors who have incarnated the role of the narrator and brought their own spin to Every Brilliant Thing. And they are joining us from here in Montreal and from coast to coast. So before we get into the conversation, let's meet our illustrious panelists today. Jenna-Lee Hyde is a prairie-born and raised actor and artist currently living in Toronto, and that's where she is today. She performed Every Brilliant Thing on 4 different stages. In addition to her many theater credits, she has also performed at Second City Toronto and on the CBC TV show Working Moms. Joining us also is Don Peten, an actor who works and lives on the ancestral unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations in Vancouver. Don performed Every Brilliant Thing at the Belfry Theatre in Victoria just before the pandemic shuttered the stage, and unfortunately before she could tour the show to Western Canada Theatre in Kamloops. Welcome, Don.
Thank you.
Steve Ross is a Dora award-winning actor who has been a company member at Stratford for at least 16 seasons. In addition to performing the Bard, he has tackled classics like Hat on a Hot Tin Roof and musicals including The Producers, Guys and Dolls. He performed Every Brilliant Thing at New Stages Theatre in Peterborough, and he joins us from St. John's, Newfoundland. Welcome, Steve. John Ullyatt is a native Montrealer who now makes his home in Edmonton, and you might remember John. He played Nicky Arnstein in Funny Girl at the Segal a few seasons back. He's worked at theaters across the country from Victoria to Montreal. Co-founder of Firefly Theatre and Circus, he performed Every Brilliant Thing at the Citadel Theatre in Edmonton right before the beginning of the pandemic. He's also a notable street performer, and over the past year and a half, John has been working as head distiller at Lone Pine Distilling in Edmonton. So welcome to John. And finally, joining us from the Segal Center with it just hours from now, he's going to be hitting the stage as the narrator. We have Montreal performer Daniel Brochu, who has also appeared at the Segal in Tribes, Haunted Hillbilly, Guys and Dolls. He's also performed on Montreal stages as The Little Prince, Petit Prince, and last night at the Gaiety. He also has 3 decades of voice and cartoon work under his belt, including the award-winning program Arthur, where he voiced Buster Baxter, amongst others. He performed the narrator at the Segal and Hudson Village Theatre last spring. And as I mentioned, he's going to be joining in the preview show this afternoon. So welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here. For the audience at home, just to let you know, we're going to be having a dialogue for the next little while. Please feel free to leave any comments or chats from whatever venue that you're listening in from. We're going to take your comments and also use questions towards the end of our discussion. So the first question is a bit broad, but I just want to add some context for our production here at the Segal. We welcomed many audiences, myself back to the theater last spring. So that's when we were able to reopen cultural venues. Now, here in October 2021, with a high rate of vaccination in Montreal, theaters can open to full capacity. We're remounting the show just, because people really need to see this. So we're like almost in a normal environment. Lisa Rubin, artistic director, sums up her view of the show as this is life-affirming theater experience like no other, and it's the perfect show to come back to the theater to see. So that's the context for the production right now. But since our panelists here have performed pre-pandemic, Danny during the pandemic, I'm curious to know what the meaning or the message was for you, what headspace you were in when you were doing the show. So it's a big question. Anyone want to tackle that first?
Sure. I'll go. I think the cool thing about this show is that the meaning is both very clear, it's very solid. The story about a show about depression and being there for somebody and gratitude. But ultimately for me, this show came to me a couple years after moving to Toronto, which, like anybody who's moved to a new city, it's very lonely, kind of discombobulating. And moving into this city and moving into the show was also the very first one-person show that I ever did. And so the meaning about community as a healing aid and about a necessary part of humanity was like such a huge takeaway for me, that like even how the show is staged in the round for most of the productions, you cannot look anywhere without seeing somebody. You can't feel alone at any part of the show, which no matter kind of how you're looking at it, whether through a mental health perspective or as a solo actor, or as somebody who maybe went to the theater alone and doesn't have community yet in your city, like you left that show having community. You left knowing that even in your loneliest moments, you can look and find somebody and get that connection. And so community and connection was like the biggest meaning for me every time.
Yeah. And especially now I find, because I've performed the show just past lockdown and mass isolation, I realized that the people who are brave enough to come to the theater after having isolated, really just needed to be around people. And so the story touching them in a way where they even if they were socially distanced in the theater, they could still look at someone across the way and just feel like they're experiencing something together, a communal feeling. And so doing the play now, in this environment, in this climate, has been really interesting for me, because so many people, the personal stories that I get after performances of people coming up to me and expressing how like complete strangers opening up to me, because I guess they feel, since I've opened up to them, they can do that. And that to me is the biggest gift that I've been given doing this play, because people are just so open and honest about their own personal stories, and they really need to talk. They really need to share stuff with you. And I think this play brings it out of them.
Steve, you're nodding vigorously, so I want to.
I am nodding vigorously. It was amazing to me how many people wanted to come up and talk, and counter to that, it was very interesting. I mean, I don't know if we want to go into the specifics of the show and stuff, but as I handed out cards to the audience every night, you could tell there was a real resistance from people at times, because people have a real fear of audience participation. But this show is so special, I think, and this show is so well written that by the end of whatever it is, 90 minutes or whatever it is, it's what everyone's been saying so far. We have created a community with that group of people that night, and I think it's something really remarkable about this show.
Yeah, and everyone inside the theater knows that too, that they're seeing a singular, unique experience. As soon as the doors close and the game of the show starts going, people realize I'm seeing something that not another audience that's coming in 2 hours from now is going to see. So I think people feel that special connection to the room, you know, and it's up to the narrator, whoever it may be, to kind of gather people and make them feel like they're all special in that particular moment, because it's not going to repeat itself. It's quite magical.
If I can jump in on
Yeah,
that magic, when I did Every Brilliant Thing at the Belfry, it was the holiday slot. It was on in December. And so you can think about how the holidays can be so difficult for people, especially if you've had tragedy, especially if you've had loss. You know, that holiday season can be so brutal for people. It's so special to do the play at that time, because it just meant no one was alone. Everything that's been said so far, the idea of community, we're all in the room together. And through the narrator meeting the audience members before the show starts, I mean, there wasn't an audience member that we don't lock eyes with at some point. There is an audience member you don't touch at some point in one sequence of the play. So you actually physically and, you know, emotionally connect with every single person in the room. And the play is so much about how we survive loss, how we keep living. And I think that is something that's so crucial even now. There's been so many losses through the pandemic. Different scales of losses for different people. But I think so much is it about as a community, and also narrowing down to what those brilliant things that are worth living for. And I think the pandemic's also done that in terms of kind of sharpening our focus on those brilliant things that we want to continue to hold tight to as kind of the world has fallen apart around us. So I found that just to be just so amazing, distilling how we survive, what we cling to, and how we connect as a big group in the theater live.
So well said, Dawn. John, you also performed shortly before the pandemic. Did you have a similar experience to Dawn's?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to, it was in February, so it was like right before the world fell apart. And we were, I mean, and shortly after that, I had a show that shut down completely because like on dress rehearsal, it shut down. But and we've all experienced that. But nobody was afraid at that time of what was to come, I guess. But everybody was talking about this thing that might be happening. But I guess I have not much to add to this. You guys are saying exactly what I felt about it. Perhaps my experience, like Jenna-Lee, you were saying that you moved to a city and you were doing a show with, you know, in a world that you were new to. I sort of had the opposite experience because I know a lot of the people who were coming to the show, and so they were talking to me like John. They were calling me John and saying John this and John that, and which was good because I had decided early on that I wanted to make it be as personal as possible. This was my goal. I mean, if the character, the narrator, doesn't have a name, but to me, the narrator's name was John, and I think that really worked in my favor because the audience were so receptive to me as a person. But it's also such an uplifting thing, and it's seen through a child's eyes right at the beginning. This child is so resilient and moving forward in his life, or her life as it may be, and that's what I took that away from it for myself as well. So it's
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, Sarah. I was just going to mention. I don't know if you guys experienced this, but one of the best compliments I get sometimes from audience members after the show is they wonder if I wrote it, which I find is the biggest compliment, because it means you're doing such a good job at personalizing it that people think it's your story. And I was like, that's so touching, you know.
Then it feel a little bit bad going, no.
I'm an actor.
I had a psychiatrist come up and say, are you getting some help?
Yeah.
Just talking to me after the show and just really wanting to see. And I'm like, sort of explained it. And I'm like, actually, I'm of quite robust mental health at the moment. But people are really taken in by it and care about you, which I think is a beautiful thing.
Totally.
Yeah,
totally.
Yes.
This leads into my
that's really, I love that, Dawn, that, people are taking care of you. That's something that I really loved about this. Talking to a friend of mine who's a great improviser, Rebecca Northern, you probably all know her. She's a person who takes care of performers. That's her main mantra. And to have that come back to you as a performer is pretty delightful.
Agreed.
I wanted to touch on, we were just talking about stepping in and making the role your own. And it's just, as I mentioned earlier, it's so interesting that, it could be anybody. The narrator, that title is never used in the course of the show. We never know necessarily what the narrator's name is. The audience doesn't hear that. And it can be any age, ethnicity, gender. So it's a carte blanche. And basically it fits around you. What is that like for you as a performer to be stepping into something where you're not conforming to a certain look and a certain kind of behavior that you're taking on the show with a blank page?
You know what I found really interesting is it's the only show I've done where I had to set my mood before the show. When I think about preparing for other shows, you're kind of getting into character, you're getting into the world of the play. And my warm-up, I felt, had to be about opening my heart up. It had to be like kind of going into the sort of beatific sense of being all generous, and again, to do with that improv aspect, all accepting of whatever the audience gives. So it's sort of getting into a state of mind, which I think is both that every person, the narrator, but also kind of the vessel for what's going on for the audience. So I found that to be so unique to the show that I needed to kind of not have any the play's got dark elements in it, but I needed to kind of be that bright light through it. So I think that's kind of, with it being played by anyone, is you're trying to bring your own heart bared to the process.
That was actually the biggest challenge for me, and still continues to be, just because I'm kind of, when I realized over time in my career, especially doing theater, I got locked into certain tricks that I would do. And one of the things I loved was that the lights were on and I wasn't able to see anyone, and I really didn't like knowing who was in the audience and who I was performing for. And you can kind of hide behind characters or hide behind whatever character you're playing. And in this one, I had to really learn or relearn a lot about myself as an actor, because you see everyone, you know exactly who's coming, and you have to be yourself. Because as soon as you're not yourself, as soon as you're kind of acting or lying a little bit, you can see the audience, they kind of give up. So you have to be completely open and completely honest, and you're absolutely right. Coming in with that mental preparation it's really hard to do. It's, as opposed to having your set things that you do, the main thing is to come in completely open-minded and take what's thrown at you, which was a big lesson for me.
That's probably what adds to your performance, though, Danny. Like that effort that you're talking about, I think that would be like something that people would see the struggle that you're going through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
yeah,
appreciate
totally.
it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They'd be supportive of that, and that would add into the darker aspect of the storytelling.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's we've discovered
I'm booking
during our we've discovered over our journey of it is that the more we take care of the audience and make them feel safe, then the more you feel as a performer taken care of as well. Like really soothing that room and making it a comfortable space for everyone.
I'm wondering for Jenna-Lee and Steve, if there was anything that you wanted to add about like stepping into this role that is a carte blanche. Is that like was unusual or something that you were eager to sink your teeth into?
I found it daunting at first, I think, because I think it was too wide, too blank a canvas. But pretty quickly, as John said, we decided to make it as personal as possible, and it sort of didn't become an issue very, very quickly. But it was at first a bit daunting to think, yeah, there are really no parameters with this, and so you just have to kind of own who you are.
Yeah. I was absolutely terrified. Totally terrified. I have never had anxiety like that, maybe in my life. Like anxiety that I knew was like walking beside me, where I was like, what's going on? Are we going to be able to eat today? Cool. Like absolutely terrified. And the like there are certain things in the show that you need that you don't know if you're going to get. Like I had 78 pieces of paper that I hand out. I need about 12 people per show at least just to have somebody to talk to. And then there's like things that are timed out, and they were timed out so specifically depending on the amount. Like there's a song where you're running around and you're talking to people and you're high-fiving. And that was timed to a specific amount. And every time before the show, I'd be like, how many tickets do we have sold? Because can we do the show? Like, I don't know. And I'm like, so there was an amount where I felt so vulnerable. And that when people showed up, I was just so happy they were there, like so grateful for, like, I'd be like counting and I'd be like, do I have a Sam? Do I have someone? Like, who knows? And so I agree so much with what everybody said about like needing to go out there and be honest. And for me, like the beginning of every show, I was a wreck. And then the second people started coming in, I was like, I'm so glad that you're here. Yeah. I'm so happy you're here. And it became like, I was really grateful for that reaction in myself, because I didn't have to put on and step into that world as much. Like the world was created every night by everybody else. Everybody else did so much work, and I just like couldn't contain my gratitude for all those people.
Well, and it is really the scariest thing in the world. Like, you know, it's so the antithesis of, you're so nervous, and the last thing you want to do is like be open and you know what I mean? It's the hardest thing to do, like just to get it to that Zen space of like, I'm just going to let happen what happens, you know? And it's really, it takes a few audiences, like about, 12 or 13 performances before you're like, okay, you know, how you can read the room and be comfortable with that. But it's a pretty long journey.
John, you wanted to add something?
Well, it's interesting. When I get nervous, one of two things happen. I talk a lot, or I get sleepy. So fortunately, I didn't get sleepy, but I do talk a lot. And so that was my struggle, was to slow down. I got very excited, and I had to slow down. Yeah. And just and I think that for me, actually, that was part of the rehearsal, was just taking my time and slowing down and just accepting whatever's happening and not trying to force things to happen. So, yeah.
I wanted to ask about audience interaction, because just hearing Jenna-Lee talk about, do we have enough people to fill the roles? Because I think it's at least 7 roles you need. A veterinarian, there's a love interest, a teacher, counselor at some point. And that's the audience. That's not you guys. I mean, you're going to like prep them and you cast them and all that stuff. But wow, like the unpredictability every evening, was that terrifying? Like,
yes, it was.
Yeah, it was. But it's also like you need numbers for the lists, because there's list numbers, and you don't want to double or triple up people, because then they can't really pay attention to the show or enjoy the show, because they're worried about giving their number. So if people have too many list entries, it becomes more of a task for them, So you need volume just to kind of be able to share the lists with.
I remember
I don't
having
know.
my
I don't know
number
if
and I
anyone
was
else
so
did,
nervous.
but I had about 7 versions of the show because we did it in a very intimate space, and so the stage manager would come to me and say, okay, so we have 40 people tonight. So then I would have to, and I knew I had to know every single list entry, and then I would go, okay, well, 200. Oh, it was terrible.
crap.
And there was
Same.
one. I think there was 2 nights where I didn't have to worry, and I gave out every card, and it was unbelievable how great it was to have every card fulfilled.
Yeah.
Wow.
Same situation. There were a few where I would like hand them out, and then I'd have to remember which ones I didn't give out, and on 2 show days be like, which one didn't give out? I did not give out last time. But the weird thing was, and I don't know, I don't feel like I have a particularly good memory, but for some reason with this show, I knew exactly where I had given every piece of paper to. And so I would like spin and look at the person. And one time I said the wrong number, and I spun and looked at the person, and they were like, ha! Number 7 on every great record. And I was like, great. And then when the show was done, they were like, you said the wrong number. And I was like, what? She's like, you did. But I knew. And I was like, oh, bless you, lady in Regina, Saskatchewan.
When it comes to the people that you get to, I think you cast them yourself, the people that you're going to have actual conversations with, like the veterinarian or the counselor. Did you ever get someone who was reluctant or nervous and you're looking at them thinking, I got to ease them in, I got to prep them or boost them up, or have someone who was maybe over eager, like just chewing the scenery in front of you?
There was
All of the above.
all of the above. Yeah.
Both.
I remember this one woman, and I think it was her first play, and I chose her. I don't remember what I chose her to do, but it was the worst choice ever. And I'm sure you guys had the same thing. But I chose her, and she just was, I think she was hammered too. And I don't know what I was thinking when I chose her. But anyway, she was just like, I'm going to be so interesting. And so I just kept calming down and saying, what would Rebecca do? So like, everything she did, I made the right thing to do. Do you know what I mean? Like I just encouraged her. So it's like acting with children and animals, right? It's like, you guys, you do it. Children and animals and other people.
Drunk children and animals.
You guys do you, and I'll make you look great. I'll make you succeed. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, I was doing the show this past summer in Hudson, and it was great. Like I learned so much about the show because it was outside, and we did it in a garden environment, and it was all natural. I had a big lake behind me, and at the end of the show, the sun was setting. It was a beautiful setting, and but still we put out garden chairs, so I was never looking at empty seats like I had been before that. And so 50 to 60 people we were allowed. And I remember the director was there at the performance, and as I was getting to this person's number who I'd given to, they were asleep.
Oh God.
They had fallen asleep, and the director realized that his number was coming up. And so as soon as I got to his number, I looked at the man, he was sleeping, and then I heard the number come from over there because the director knew what the number was. And so he had to call out the number, and the guy just still didn't wake up. He slept through the whole thing.
Dean Patrick Fleming to the rescue.
Yes, exactly.
Dean, who's also directing Danny again in the run at the Segal that is about to start. Dawn?
I was just going to say, it's the beauty of the show, that wildcardness. And I mean, it's what I like about theater, that wildness of anything can happen. And it's what the audience loves being in on too.
They love it.
So there were times with a social worker character who's kind of counseling the narrator. Sometimes the counselor, the social worker, the audience member would say the most beautiful, moving thing. And the beautiful thing about the show is we're all hearing it, the whole room, including the performer, is not in on what that person's going to say. So when they say something poignant and moving, that's, tears jump to all of our eyes in terms of we're all touched by that. Yeah. Same thing when there's the dad that gives the wedding speech in the case of the show, like that can be so moving, and it can also be cringeworthy and awful, as wedding speeches are. So I remember in one performance, the dad saying, to my would-be husband, she's your problem now. and everyone in the room going, like, but which happens at weddings, right? These terrible things that people say when they've had too many drinks. So all of that, we get to be in on that together, life's awkwardness and poignancy. And the one challenge I did have, only out of one show, I had someone who absolutely in the lobby had been a great conversation, great one-on-one. But when I chose them as my love interest in the show, they just, I don't know if it was their level of anxiety, they just were resistant, and it was so challenging. And as John, you mentioned that idea of being all accepting of where they're at and trying to make them comfortable. And the whole time your mind is doing gymnastics of how to solve things. I knew that person wouldn't get up out of their seat. So all the different stuff you plan, sort of in terms of the blocking or having them walk with you as the script suggests, I had to kind of do cartwheels in my head, figuring out where can I be, that I'll be seen, that he'll be seen. And after the show, I just burst into tears, because with that vulnerability you bring, the rejection felt so personal, even though that's not really what they're doing. But also I felt like I was feeling for them, that they had been in a tough situation. I was feeling for their awkwardness and their tension. So it really is kind of the span of what you get, but makes it beautiful because the whole audience is with you, right? They know what's going on. So if you're being stonewalled, they're there kind of, appreciating what you're having to work with.
Did any of you in rehearsal, we talked about this, like it was like a planning meeting. A lot of rehearsal was like, what happens if this happens? What happens if this happens? Yeah. And I mean, also during rehearsal, I felt bad for the director and the assistant director that we had. It was like, you're going to be doing everything for the rest of rehearsal. But I sort of had a plan. I don't know if I had to put it into place. I can't remember. Maybe I've blocked it out. But I was like, and I would just slip out of the kid character, for example, and say, and then their stunt double stepped in, and we picked somebody else, right? And it was like, I just give this person an out if it was just going so bad for that person, or I felt like I don't remember if I had to, engage that plan. But
I had that happen once where the person that I chose, and I can't remember who it was for, they were really adamant in the moment when I was like, and so, and they were like, no. And they immediately were like, absolutely not. And I remember seeing once a long time ago in a Fringe show where the audience like the person who the actor had chosen to be the audience participant was like, no. And the actor was like, no, you are. And it became so violent and uncomfortable, like not physically violent, but like the energy was violent, that I was like, I can't do this. So I think I did something similar where I was like, and I was always getting her mixed up with the real so-and-so. And then I just switched to somebody else and was like, are we good? And I think like, you can, like, I think it was you, John, who said you can tell where the audience goes, no, we don't like this, we don't trust what's happening here. And I don't know if I've ever felt that so much as in this show. And sometimes you have to go like, this is actually going to be okay, and make everybody believe in that person. But it happened more than once where there were a few times that people were like, oh, I don't know. And you'd hear from the audience, you can do it. You can do it. And started cheering each other on. Like people really believed in each other. So it became such a communal event that the audience was really there for each other too.
I just want to mention we have a nice comment from Jenna-Lee, from Kirsten Steve Walshwit, says, what a necessary play, with such a joy to work with Jenna-Lee Hyde to create Burnt Thicket Theatre's production of EBT. So a little shout out for you.
Hi, Kirsten. What a gorgeous person.
How do you guys cast the performers? Like, is that something that you do because the narrator is on stage already, kind of like in a Fringe show when people walk in and get their numbers and their pieces of paper? Is that where you decide, this is going to be my Sam, this is going to be my veterinarian?
Well, in my case, because of the COVID protocols, we kind of do a pre-casting to a certain extent. So we get a list of what the audience list, and because we have certain seats set up for Sam and Dad and Mrs. Patterson especially, just because we have to do that. And so we kind of, the director and I and the stage manager, Mel St. Jacques, kind of go through the list and have an idea. I mean, it can always change in the moment, but for our production, we do a pre-casting. So sometimes I even know who I'm going to cast as Sam because she's sitting in that seat, and I have an idea of who I'm going to use as Dad, and so that kind of helps a little bit because I know the person's energy, and sometimes the theater itself will know the people in the audience more than me, and they'll make suggestions about maybe who the dad should be or who the lecturer should be, and so it's like we're all as a team, we're trying to decide together who the best energy would be in the room. And something, 90% of the time it works out pretty well, I find it's funny. It's more the average person who is like you tend to think, well, if you cast an actor, then the actor will be even more helpful. But it's always the average person who does a way better job, It's
We're
funny.
getting a lot of vigorous hand signals, so not an option to cast a fellow actor as any audience role.
Actors are terrible people.
Actors
too.
are terrible.
Yeah.
They're just awful.
Why is that?
I think because it's like, oh, I'm acting now. I don't know what it is, and I don't do that.
I think because immediately there's such this belief of responsibility. I think that for some actors, they're like, "'Tis my moment." Like you can tell when an actor's in an audience sometimes because the laughing changes. Like something happens, and then it's like, and you're like, "Your laugh isn't the show, Brian." Like it's so strange.
Right.
And then
That's
sometimes
very specific, Jenna-Lee.
I picked one that I knew didn't know a Brian. You'll never guess who I'm talking about. But I think sometimes there's this idea that this is where maybe they belong or they need to help you in some way. And sometimes you want to be like, you get to have a night off in every way. Get up, back to your seat.
It's a very difficult thing. I think there's been times where I've been picked as a volunteer, like in whatever, let's say. And so I think I've got this alter ego that I just shut down when I'm just like, I'm a normal average person. I don't know, maybe I become my father.
The role of your life.
The role of my life, my God. Look how non-anything I am.
Look how average I am.
Look how average I feel like we're in like a self-help group, the five of us together, like sharing these experiences. I wished we'd been able to do this sooner. I'm really enjoying this.
I know.
Well, we sort of did, didn't we, John?
Yeah,
you and me and Rebecca had a bit of. We were all doing it at the same time, and so we had a bit of a Facebook chain going and saying, "Oh, well, this happened last night," and "Oh, she wouldn't take the sock off tonight," and stuff. It was very helpful. I loved the fact that we could all talk about it and laugh with each other because no one else knows. This is why I love this panel discussion. Yeah. We know what this is like, and we all can relate to what happened.
Yeah.
One person show therapy. We should all be part of a group. That's what we've all went through.
I'm Jenna-Lee Hyde, and I'm a narrator.
I'm John Ullyatt. I've been in a solo person show, and I'm okay now.
You are
I had somebody proposed when Sam proposed to me. She had just got engaged to somebody, and she took off her engagement ring and gave me her engagement ring.
Wow.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
So nice. Did you keep it?
I totally did. Like I wasn't going to pay that much.
For one of the first performances I did here at the Segal, my wife came to see the show, and there were not everyone in the audience, but most of the other members of the audience were strangers. And so we had rehearsed it because of COVID protocols. I couldn't touch hands. I can't touch anyone. And so when the whole Sam proposed part came, and it was my wife on stage with me, she actually hugged me and we kissed. And I just remember an audible gasp from the audience. They were just like, oh my God. He kissed someone. They not realizing it was my wife, so it was okay. But I remember the shock.
Say, she's actually my wife. We're just doing this because we.
We're just renewing our vows.
Aww.
It was tech time. You didn't have a lot of quality time, so she came to the show.
Yeah, exactly.
We talked about this. That we were, I think, with Rebecca and Steve. Did we talk about this? About picking somebody who's the same sex as you.
Oh.
Did you do that, Steve?
I never ended up doing it, and I wish I had. I think it would have been really interesting. I never found the right person, and
Yeah.
I knew that it was a huge responsibility to put on someone.
Right.
If I had picked another guy, and I never wanted, and as I can't remember who, I think Jenna-Lee, you said it, that the whole deal was, you're going to be okay. I'm never going to make anyone look stupid, and I never wanted that. So I mean, I wish I had, though. I would have been really interested to see. Did you do that?
Well, I thought long and hard about it, and then I thought personally it would be weird for me to do because I'm not in a same-sex relationship. So I think that would have been inauthentic on my part. You know what I mean?
Right.
So number one, I would have had to have found somebody, like you say, who was available for a same-sex relationship. And then I'd have to play that part because that's not me. So
yeah, that's true.
I wonder, and I think it would be really interesting for the audience to see that. I think it'd be really cool. I'm pretty sure somebody's done that along the way, but I haven't heard about it. You did?
Oh, you did.
I did it once. I did ask permission for this at the beginning. I said I would love for the opportunity for Sam to be anybody. I'd love it to be a he, a she, a them. I'd love it to be anybody. And ultimately, there was that exact same conversation, John, with the director, where he said, well, because you are not part of the queer theater community, I feel like maybe that's not our story to tell. And I was like, okay, I can see that. There's going to be like an incredible Every Brilliant Thing on Church Street, or somewhere where they're going to do that. But I had one night where I didn't have any Sams. There was no Sam. It was like there was a very elderly audience one night, which is also fine, but that's also a different story. And there was this one woman who was there alone. And I had one moment where I sort of looked at her and she went, oh, and I went, and then we fell in love in the library. And she was maybe my best, like one of the best Sams I had that entire time. Oh. She was so open. She was incredible. She was so loving. And she was like one of the best scene partners, even like not even in Every Brilliant Thing, like across my theater career. I was like, you listened like nobody I've ever met. She was really incredible. So if that woman from Regina, Saskatchewan is watching, you were incredible.
That's great.
So nice to hear about what a remarkable performance that must have been. I wanted to ask about finding similarities because you take on you bring so much of yourself to the role. And Danny and I, speaking last week, were talking about parallels he found in his own life with parallels in the narrator's life. And I think lay people, non-actors, are always curious to know whether you bring personal experiences to the table to be able to relate to things. Obviously, you're not going to find every single, a parallel in everything that you're going to be playing from your real life. But the experience of losing your dog at the beginning, just to show one example. For you guys, was there anything where you went diving deep into something from your past in order to bring it up?
I struggle with anxiety and depression, and I felt that it was important to explore, like to give that away. Do you know what I mean? And to represent that community of people. But ultimately, that it kind of bogged me down thinking too much about like how important that was to help me through. But I think at every part that I've played, I think that's what we do, is we find what we try to feel empathy and compassion for the characters that we sorry, I'm just distracted by looking at myself. We find empathy and compassion for the characters that we're playing, and that's the only way that you can get into it. But ultimately, you are playing a part. I kind of lost my train of thought on this. Sorry, but it's not like I'm like forcing something in. It's like that's my way of understanding something so that I can interpret what's going on.
And I was always reminded by the director too, because there was there are certain lines in the show that are almost directly taken, cut and pasted from my childhood. Like particularly the line where I say, sometimes I'd have nothing in my lunchbox, or not have socks on or something, you know, and that was a reality for me when I was a kid growing up. But, you know, I was always reminded by the director, by Dean Fleming, that, you know, you have to remember, instead of wallowing in that the reason the whole story is being told is because he's past it. Or she's past it. The person has come out on the other side. So you can't really bathe too long in those moments. You can hit them and make them poignant, but it's also really important to know, as a performer and also the audience, to always keep on reminding the audience that the person's past it, and they've survived through it, right?
And Dean's actually listening today, and he added, "So great to hear you all. Don't give away too much." Don't. Thank you, Dean, who's our director. I think I saw a hand up as someone was going to add something to that question. No?
I may have done that.
Oh, okay. Did anyone else kind of find like, it's also such a universal story. It's so relatable, talking about childhood and growing pains and dealing with parents and love. Like, was there anything that you found that you needed or relied on for the role?
Coffee, lots of coffee.
I just felt like it allowed me to drop in quicker, because I had a complicated relationship with my mother, and it didn't parallel it. It did. I mean, it did vaguely, and occasionally there would be times in rehearsals where I would talk about it with the director and stuff. But I just felt like it allowed for this relationship between the character and the mother to be honest and to be what it was. I was so interested. I wish I had been able to see a woman do the role, because the relationship between a son and a mother is very different than the relationship between a daughter and a mother. I'd love to hear from either of you about what your experiences. Did you find it different as you rehearsed it?
Yeah. I think because this show can be played by anybody, but you do notice as you read through it, it is heavily male in a lot of ways still. Most of the artists are male. The connection technically with the dad instead. Often record collections are a big legacy between father and son, not necessarily father and daughter. Not to say it is a gendered item, but often that is how it seems to work. And I don't know because I also had a bit of, I think the connection that I have with this show is that I did lose my dad a few years ago. So I didn't lose my mom, but I lost a parent. And I think that that's a pretty heavy life assignment that I don't know if I would have had any idea how to talk about the death of a parent the way that I did in this show even. And then also going with you, Danny, like it is also it's a tightrope, because I can't bring that to this show, because it's not my therapy. That would be actually inappropriate for me to make it about that completely. Yeah, but holding all of these things, and I think they're all in my vision to hold, but I can't necessarily say that the play is totally different because I was a female instead of a man, you know what I mean? And that relationship between parent, because ultimately what it came down to is the fact that, it is I tried to make it more about losing a parent than losing specifically a mom figure or a dad figure, because also I think when a person is going through something, their gender identity might not be fully, what am I trying to say here? This might not be a fully formulated language thought yet.
I think I know what you're saying. It sounds like it's not important what gender you are when you're missing a parent, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
I think so. I think that's what I had to hook on to. and also because like in this story, the relationships that I had with my parents were not these relationships at all.
Right.
You know, I did, you know, so that was also interesting to hold and just allow that to be instead of trying to change that in any way.
We still have time to take questions. So if you are viewing online via Facebook and YouTube, please feel free to leave a question in the comments. We do have one. What is one specific thing that each of you did to personalize your time as the narrator? One thing perhaps that you threw in, because there's a lot of pop culture references and activities that the narrator drops. And there are notes that say, you know, you can personalize as much as possible, because this was performed initially in the UK by a man. So obviously little details have to change. Who would like to go first?
I did a lot of math so that I could make the dates work out in my favor. That was important to me. But I don't know. Other than that, I don't think I changed anything. I don't think I was like, no, we can't have Curtis make it. Okay, that's not.
Steve?
I'm trying to think. I don't think I did anything major. The thing that made me feel very personal was I had the text that Sam sent me at the end of the show was on my phone. So I was able to give her my phone every night. And I don't know why it made me feel great about it, but I loved that.
So your actual phone as prop. Okay, that's cool.
It was my phone as a prop, and it was an actual text that I can't even remember how I rigged it to do it, but I had it, so I just had to hand it to her and she could read the text verbatim. I was always very happy with that. It was a very satisfying part of it for me. I don't know why.
Yeah, I like that.
I wouldn't trust my phone.
Jenna-Lee?
We did have to change a couple things because I think one of the number 23 is Mighty Mouse, and we changed it because I was like, well, that's Mr. Dress Up to me. So we had number 23 was Mr. Dress Up, and I think I changed oh shoot, what actor is it? I changed it to Meryl Streep because I wanted a female actor instead of the Godfather, bless him. And then also it's like a very small thing, but I don't feel like I was too young for this show, but there's a line about cell phone use. And I was like, we can't use that line because they've always been around.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a great line.
The original performer, Johnny Donahoe, was born in 1983. And so the narrator says, you know, this was back before we had the chats and the text messaging and things. And so I assume moving forward, this show will still, I imagine, be popular and people will want to do it. But there's going to be some, major changes that will have to be done as depending on the narrator's age and the audience that's in front of them.
1983, come on.
Only 83, interesting.
Wow. That's when I graduated high school. Shut up.
I know.
Don,
I had to do the opposite. I had to minus years to make it make sense for my age. I was like, ooh.
Just in terms of the personal
time.
Go ahead, Don.
In terms of the personalizing, one of the favorite things, what I really loved about our production that our director Estelle Shook came up with is that all the records are played live by our sound designer, Brian Linz, who is this amazing Victoria sound designer who has a record collection to rival anyone's. And so he had all the records that he played live on the side of the stage.
Wow.
And he was like a person in the room that felt a bit like the narrator's dad. A great sort of touchstone for me. And so one of my favorite things, the way we personalize it, is to find which song we wanted me to dance to. So the big long number that has to be like 7 or 9 minutes to encompass all the text that goes in it, all the dancing and everything, and the touching and the interaction with the audience. So we would have our beginning of rehearsal would start with a dance party and a listening party where we would, Brian brought in all these crates of records and we would grab one out, put it on, he would choose a song and we would just dance and say, does this feel right? Does this feel right? Or even choosing the song at the end of the play when we're told, you know, it's something female jazz singer. So choosing those as a group, and what felt really good was that was a big personalization. And for our pre-show, maybe this is the way some other shows have done it as well. I was in the lobby way before the show started. So the casting happened in the lobby. So Estelle's idea was that I was like, it was a hostess, that I was the hostess of my party. Welcome to the theater. I would meet you at the door. I could take your coat and hang it up, help you get something from concession. So there was I got to have a lot of chit chat with people, then welcoming them, introducing myself by my name. I'm Dawn, I'm the performer today, and chatting with them. So I felt there was a lot of personalization. And the other great idea Estelle had is in the lobby, we had paper for people to write their brilliant things, their lists. So yeah, I'm sure you've all had variations on that. So just reading those kind of every day and every night was just kind of put you again in how tangible, how tactile this experience is for people.
That's so beautiful. And I feel like everyone's thinking like, how could I have done that differently? Or how could we have incorporated some of that into my run? That leads us to my final question, very quick. I just want to know, what would you add this morning to your list of Every Brilliant Things? I'll go first if you need a moment. I was preparing my notes today and was just thinking, helping someone dealing with a sudden nosebleed. That's what I would add to my list today. Who would like to go first?
I will. Too bad. Sharing, doing a play before the pandemic and then coming back and talking about it with people some people you know and some people you don't know, and laughing about it and thinking back 2 years ago. Somebody else.
Yeah, this is pretty brilliant. I agree. Also, when a large dog comes and sits on your foot.
Oh,
I don't know why. I like it.
Steve?
I will echo Johnny's and say the shorthand that has existed within this group today, talking about this show, that very few people understand.
We're in a select group, it feels like.
yeah.
And we're coming down to Dawn and to Danny before we sign off. One Every Brilliant Thing to add to the list?
Yeah, well, just the holy communion of theater, being in a live room with people. But I also have to say my 4-year-old dancing is pretty darn brilliant.
There you go. I would say theater's reopening is a good one. It's a brilliant thing. It feels good to have the theater buzzing again. But also, I was just thinking, I just came back from a trip, and I was surprised to be given first class. So being surprised by first class tickets on an airplane was pretty sweet.
Ooh, leaving us all with that taste of wanting to travel sometime soon, hopefully to another city, maybe to see another performance of Every Brilliant Thing. Well, thank you all so much. A very big plaudit, and thank you to our panelists today. I'm going to remind you of their names. Our narrators, Jenna-Lee Hyde, Don Peten, Steve Ross, John Ullyatt, and Daniel Brochu, who's about to incarnate the role in just a matter of hours. This has been a very interesting Sunday at the Segal because it's been, as someone coined, a bit of a support group for all these very gifted and talented performers who've had the honor and privilege of putting on the show. And hopefully, I'd love, Lisa commented this in the chat, that I hope I could see one of you guys perform this show sometime in the future. A very big thank you as well to Gabriella Saltiel, Debbie Friedman, and Lisa Rubin, and the team at the Segal Center for your work in bringing us all here today. And of course, thank you at home for taking the time to join us. You can book your ticket at segalcenter.org, 514-739-7944. I hope everyone enjoys Every Brilliant Thing and the rest of your Sunday. I'm Sarah Deshaies. Stay well and be safe.
Married Danny.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Break a leg. Break a leg.
Thank you.
Break a leg.
Thank you.